everyone. Welcome to Arise with Grace, the podcast that celebrates and empowers the stories of strong, resilient women of faith who have moved from surviving to thriving and from pain to promise. I am your host, Phoenix Grace. I've been through both literal and figurative fires in my life. In the midst of my wilderness season, God told me, "You have walked through fire and survived. Now you will rise from the ashes and thrive." So I did. Now I have made it my mission to help empower women to be who they were created to be and live life in full bloom: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. Hello, everyone. My guest today is Jennifer Sheppler. Jennifer Sheppler is a writer and vlogger who shares her testimony through inspirational stories that help others on her YouTube channel, Food for Life, where the food isn't just for the belly. Welcome, Jennifer. I am
Thank
so grateful to
you.
have you on the show.
Thank you, Phoenix, for inviting me. I'm just as excited as you are. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
you're welcome. So I just have to let everyone know, Jennifer, I've been asking her to come on the show. We actually know each other in real life. We go to church together, and she's one of
Yes.
my newest and becoming one of my dearest friends. So I just am really what do you too. I'm just so grateful for this opportunity to
Hmm.
learn more about you, Jennifer, and just share in the up and coming good things that are coming. So I'm so
Yes.
excited. So first of all, what Jennifer Sheppler? Tell me about your
Yeah.
name.
Well, I love my last name. I've always liked it. And then in high school, I kind of got made fun of with it. And then I ended up getting married. And then after that, I kind of appreciated my last name more. But my first name is exciting because my dad in the 70s, there's this song. I don't know how many people will remember it, but it goes something like Jennifer, Juniper, sitting somewhere. I don't even remember that much anymore. It's been so many years. And I remember him telling me that that's where he found my name and that's where they named me. And of course, I share that name with many, many people out there.
It's a common name for our generation.
Sure is. Yes. So professionally, I'm Jennifer, but if we're talking fun and off the professional side, I'm just Jen. So I answer to
Yeah,
both.
you're Jen. I know you as Jen, but
Yeah.
your name says Jennifer Sheppler and your bio said Jennifer Sheppler, so I'm calling you Jennifer Sheppler.
Thank you. I appreciate
Well, I
that.
looked up the name meaning Jennifer, um, and it says it's originally a Cornish version of the Welsh name Gwennifer.
Okay.
Um, and it comes from the Celtic root words, so white, fair, or blessed. It also means blessed.
I like that.
Right?
Blessed.
Isn't that cool?
Yes. And I think that's
And
fitting.
Sheppler, go ahead.
Yes.
Right? And we'll hear about your blessings and how you've been
Hmm.
blessed and you've turned your pain into your promise, right? Into God's
Sure
promise.
did.
The name Sheppler, I looked that up too because when I think Sheppler, I think of like shepherd, right? Or pastor. A pastor is a shepherd. It says it's believed to be of Anglo-Saxon origin and literally means a meadow where sheep are kept. So
Well,
that's
that's
kind of cool.
interesting. And I
Yeah.
forgot about my uncle was once telling me that our last name was actually changed. We were in the French, and our name was French, and our ancestors had to leave France, I guess.
Oh,
And then, so in order to be Americanized, they altered the spelling. So our name is actually Chapler. Um,
Sheppler.
Sheppler.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's
Well,
interesting to me.
parlez-vous
A lot
français?
of
Parlez-vous français,
but then
Jennifer?
I'm told we're German, so who knows?
Not even cereal box French. You've been in Canada for a while.
Right?
I'm just teasing
Still
you.
can't learn the language. I've tried.
I'm just teasing you. But anyways, I just
Of
thought that was really
course.
cool. And Meadow, I love Meadow. And
Mhm.
of course, my business is Life of Bloom, so I like to see women bloom. So Meadow, that just we didn't find this out till today what the name meaning was. So it's just really
And I
interesting.
didn't
Still,
know that. So that's extra special, that a meadow. I
right?
really like that. Yeah,
It's so beautiful.
for
So
sure. Thank
I
you.
see, I know you, I as this lady that, you have so many interesting stories of like the God moments you've had and I see you, you're beautiful, you've got this
Oh,
beautiful
thank
hair
you.
and you seem very poised. Now, did you come out of the womb like that? Like was that your identity as a child? Like tell me a little bit about your early years.
Well, absolutely not. This new person you see here is completely different than in the beginning. So I was born in Portland, Oregon, and I was born to a family, a mother and a father who were on drugs and were drinkers and very young. So my mom
Mm.
was 16 when she had me.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, and so growing up with that, I can only imagine what life was like. But I don't really remember much before I was 8 years old. And there was a time where they they were getting close to their divorce. And so there was one particular time before they divorced. I remember my mom saying that she didn't like little girls. And so that
Oh,
to
and you were a
me,
little girl, and she told you
yes,
that. Wow.
yes. And I remember thinking, why? Like, why would she say something like that? And, but I never really worried about being a girl. She never placed that on me. And so I think that could be why I was abused by her. She had a lot of issues, and I put up with a lot of verbal abuse and then
Mm.
physical abuse too. And I remember one time, like, she was the worker who took care of the household and who managed everything. And my dad was still the one who was kind of like on the sidelines, losing jobs. And
Mm.
so he just never was that worker. And then
Right.
my mom was the one who was taking care of everything. And so I
Yeah.
believe that that's why the physical abuse happened. And one
Oh.
particular time, she
Like she was
slapped.
stressed from doing all the
I think
things, like
so. I
being in
think she
charge of
was.
everything?
And then can you imagine having a child at 16? Like,
No,
that's
I
not really
cannot.
much of a childhood. And of course,
Right?
all this is in hindsight. I didn't think of this when I was young, but I see things differently now. So I kind of got the butt end of the issues with her, and I guess I can only assume that I was in her way. She was a stressed out mom, and she was a slapper. She'd slap me across the face. And one time I had a welt that was literally the size of her hand, and it was raised red skin. And I remember thinking, why doesn't she want me? Like, I don't know what I did. I always thought I did something wrong. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of life I lived in as a young girl, who saw violence and who saw drug use and who saw drinking and what that looked like.
And
And
that was your
then
normal at the
that
time,
was my
probably.
normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember watching family fights outside our trailer, and my dad coming home with blood on his face. Like, it was crazy to see stuff like that.
Oh
And
wow.
so that put, I think, a lot of fear into me. That's when some
Mhm.
fear started happening, and
Mhm.
life was difficult. I remember going to several different schools even before they divorced. Yeah, so
Mm.
that was
Like
hard for me.
moving, you mean, or like?
Yes, we would move. I can remember schools more than I can remember places I lived at home. So I
Okay.
remember one time, this would be years later, I wrote down all the schools that I went to, and there had to have
Oh,
been probably 12 by the time I
wow.
reached 12 years old. I remembered that many
Wow.
schools.
So like one a year, if not multiple within a year, right?
Yes.
Like,
And I was always the new student. You know, I didn't go in the new year with everybody being new together. I was the one that stood at the front, all eyeballs on me. And I mean, that was intimidating. And so struggles in school always caused me to cry. And that's when bullies would
mm,
come over. And so
they
I
saw you the
struggled a lot.
weakness,
Yes,
the vulnerability within you, and they took
absolutely.
advantage of that. Just
Absolutely.
like the
Yes.
enemy takes advantage of
We
things
were
that aren't
just
healed,
talking
right?
about this yesterday. I
Yeah,
think you were there. Yeah.
yeah.
The vulnerability. Yeah. I was, you could smell it on me. So,
And the fear, you said fear, right? So there was fear
oh,
too,
yeah.
and vulnerability.
Yeah. And then, of course, when you're in school and teachers are trying to teach you things, and I'm like, what? I don't get this. I knew that I didn't really have that education there because I kept moving, and there were gaps of
Mm,
education that got taken out. And later, I would be deemed as a special needs child and had a learning disability. But what the system didn't realize is this was a child who moved 12 times before she even reached age
right.
9 or 10. So, of
Yeah.
course, I'm not going to know anything. I was frustrated in school. So
Oh, for
school,
sure.
that was an issue from young age to even out of high school. I had
Mhm.
gone through that. Yeah.
Mm. You probably never thought, you know, that you'd be writing and sharing and
Actually, no, it was in high school when I met with my best friend. I told her one day, I said, "Hey, I'm going to write a book." This was out of the blue. We weren't even talking about books. I remember the day as if it was yesterday. And she went, "Cool." And and
She
I
wasn't like,
remember
"What are you talking about?"
And I remember thinking, it's not going to be a child's book. I remembered that at 15 years old. I remember saying that. And I thought, well, I wonder what it could be. And then, of course, I messed around with poetry, and that wasn't really my thing. I felt like I had to force myself to write the poetry out. So I know, like, that's not
Hmm.
going to be me. And then, of course, I was always the one that was excited in school. Essays, yay! And everybody was looking at me like, you're boring. But that's how
They
I
probably
gained.
said, did they say you're a nerd, you're a dweeb,
Absolutely.
you're a brown nose, or what other names did we have back then? We're the same age,
Oh,
so
I know, right? Teacher's pet. We
Oh, so tell me more. Okay, so you talked about your mom leaving a slap on your face. Did the
Yeah.
school, like, did they ever say anything about that, or?
No, our growing up, everything was under the rug, and I remember when I got older, grandma would say comments to me, as I brought my baby girl to see her, and she would say, "Yeah, I remember you being slapped as a baby when you only needed a bottle." And I was like, "Oh, wow." Like,
Yeah.
I don't I have to think that the fact that I can't remember anything before 8 years old is a blessing, because I can only
Mhm.
imagine what life might have been like, So,
Your mind was
and that
you're being protected, right? From
yes, there's protection happening. And that was one of the things that I remember thinking when my daughter was a baby, that I will break the cycle of abuse, physical
Yeah,
abuse, at least at the time, that there's no
right.
way that I'm going to raise my children like that. Now, that doesn't mean that I was a perfect mom, but
Mhm.
I know now when I look at my children that they're full of love, and that's what matters to me. Yes, so I
Amen.
believe I broke that cycle,
So tell
and
me the steps between, like, okay, so you had your childhood, you were physically abused, you were rejected,
yes,
you know, you moved so many times that
yes,
the label put on your forehead was this child that might be learning disabled and rejected, learning disabled, not wanted. Like,
yes,
so
lots of
what happened
untruths.
in between you deciding, like, that upbringing, to you deciding to break the cycle, to having kids, to we've missed, like, the whole middle. Can you tell me a little more about your early life
For
and
sure.
carrying on? Yeah.
Yeah, so after my parents divorced, one of the things that was really put onto me heavily that I was not a loved child or a wanted child is when my mom left my dad, she left both of us. She didn't take me with her. And so my
Mm.
dad ended up going to his parents' house. And I don't really remember what happened to me in the beginning. I don't know where I went. So now there's a period where it's kind of like a dream. Next thing you know, you're living somewhere. And so that's what's happened to my brain. I think there was
Oh,
parts of
wow.
it that got blocked.
Yeah.
And so the next memory I have is living with my mother. And I was excited about that because I know my whole life, even when I was 8, that I do remember wanting my mother to love me. And I would do anything, you know, tell her I love her over and over and over. And she wasn't the
Mm.
person that would say, I love you too. She would just say, you too, or okay, or uh huh. And so I'm a
Oh,
child who needs to hear I love you, and I'm not getting it.
yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
really difficult. So when I got that chance to live with my mom, I was excited. I thought, ooh, this is our chance to bond. And then she had some friends come over one day, and these friends were mutual friends when my parents were together. We'd all get together as a big family and do fun things together. And so I got to
Okay.
grow with their children. So
Mhm.
evidently, I never saw them again with my dad. So evidently, they were my mother's friends. And so
Mm.
they came over one day, and one evening, I woke up to the father of the family molesting me.
Oh.
And so, I mean, I was confused. I woke up and thinking, you know, why? Why is he doing that? And I was
Mhm.
confused, and I had a hard time going back to sleep, and
Well, yeah.
I was thinking, like, "How am I gonna tell my mother this? She's not gonna believe me." And so I kept it quiet. Didn't wanna get slapped for something that she thought that I was lying about, and, like, she adored these people, and so I just kept it to
Well, if
myself.
she slapped you when you needed a bottle, you
Yeah,
know, and it
yeah,
seems like your needs were not important or
right.
treated as important,
Yeah, I
how
got
would
that
she
message.
react?
Yeah. So the message was, I'm a child that's not wanted, isn't loved. It doesn't matter what I have to say. Children shall be seen, not heard. So I kept quiet. I
Mhm.
couldn't do anything. And
Mm.
now the next memory I remember is I got pulled away from grandma or my mom, and then I went to her parents' house. So I can only assume that she probably couldn't afford me or something. I don't know. It wasn't because of the molestation because I never told her. And
Right,
so
right.
I went to another school and I lived there for a while. And now grandma was a foster mother, and she had a foster child, and that's where my mom learned the slapping. And I mean, I'm watching as a
Like,
9-year-old.
her mother slapped the foster children?
Yes. So my
Oh
mom's
my.
mom, who I was living with, never laid a hand on me. She doted me. She loved me. And but I could see that she was slapping this mentally retarded girl, mentally handicapped.
Oh.
So
Oh.
handicapped is the proper term, not
Right.
so,
Yeah.
so this is a 22-year-old, maybe 30-year-old who acts like she's 7. So we got along
Right.
great. And
Yeah.
when she would act like a 7-year-old, grandma would come in and slap her like you would not believe. I mean,
Oh, and that
across
was her
the head.
developmental age, like
And I'm watching this, like she wasn't even shy about it. So of course, I reserve and I'm like, I'm going to stay out of her way. I'm going
you
to
learned to
be very obedient. And I was a child that was sent to watch TV a lot. So my TV not only became my best friend, it also became my babysitter.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
as soon as I get out of school, get to grandma's, watch TV. I'm out of her way, just like out of my mom's way. I learned that
Right.
pattern. Stay out of her
Coping.
way.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and then I wasn't there very long. I can only remember being there 1 year. And then that's when I ended up going and living with my dad and his parents. And so now that place is where I would find God. I would know at least who he is in a sense. Like I wasn't told, well, God is our master who created the world. It was
Mhm.
a presence in our house. And I remember saying one day, "Oh God, I don't like these peas or something." I said something and grandpa says, "You don't say God in this house." Oh, oh,
Like, you
okay.
don't say God's name in vain, or you don't say
Yeah, he
God
said
at
that's what
all?
it was. You don't say
Oh,
God's
okay.
name in vain. And I'm like, okay, I'm about 11 or 12 years old and I'm thinking, God's name in vain. I don't, I wonder what that means. But I didn't
Yeah.
really have an understanding of that. So I'm just like, okay, don't say God when I guess I'm upset. I can only think that
You
God was the
didn't.
one who
Wow.
placed the mentality of what that meant because I never said it in that way again. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and so nobody else taught me. He didn't get into details with that, but that is where I learned about religion, and I'm,
From your
you know.
grandparents. So did they
Yeah,
go to church then?
they did
Did they
go to
go
church. They went
Okay.
every Saturday, and you don't wear makeup, you don't wear
So were
pants.
they Seventh-day Adventists then if they went to
No,
church on
they were
No.
actually non-Protestant. And it's strange because when I explain the rules that they follow, they say, "Oh, they must be Jehovah's Witness." And I'm like, "No, they're definitely not Jehovah's Witness."
Okay.
um, because of other factors. And
Okay.
like they still did unleavened bread. You're not allowed to eat pork. You fast.
Okay.
Fasting, yes, that's still current today, but they're
Yeah.
they're very by the
Okay.
Old Testaments. The only thing they didn't
Yeah.
do is slaughter animals.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
yeah, and so I grew to knew of God, but didn't know who he was, and I
Right.
never heard Jesus. I don't know who that is in grandma's
Interesting.
house.
Okay.
It is interesting. So,
So how long were you
then
in your in grandma's house then?
I was there for about 2 years, and
Okay.
I was pulled out of that because that's when my father's sexual abuse started happening, and that
Because
happened
your
for a
dad was
year.
living there too. Yeah.
Yes. So now, as I'm living there, I can see that grandpa and my dad do not get along. They just don't speak unless they need to speak. So I knew that closeness, there's something there. And
Mhm.
with my grandma, she was like sick of kids. And now she's got to raise this younger girl. And she didn't want to teach me to clean. She didn't teach me to cook. She didn't teach me how to do
Mm.
laundry. So I'm this kid who pretty much gets to be a kid, which I love.
Mhm.
And I pulled
As long as
weeds
you stay out of her hair.
in this. Yeah, there's that out of the hair thing. And this is
Yeah.
a different family member. This is my dad's side now. And I'm getting now 2 messages. Oh, I'm in the way again. I'm not needed here. I'm not wanted here. Why am I here? And so, and then after my grandparents, after my dad finally intimidated one day and trying to tell me that if I tell family members
About
anything
the
that he's
abuse?
about the
Yeah.
abuse, that he would kill himself. And
Oh,
I'm about
guilt and
12 years old.
manipulation.
Very much so.
Mhm.
And I'm 12 years old and I'm going, Dad, like, I know you're faking it. And I was done at this point. And so
Mm.
I finally told one of my cousins about it. And then she told her mom. And then my aunt went to grandma. And then it was exposed. And then we went to court. I remember grandma telling me, you don't want dad to go to jail, right? And I'm like,
Oh,
no,
oh. Once
I
again,
remember.
missing your needs and your
Yes. Yeah, I didn't even
oh.
get to talk about it. Like, my
I'm
cousin
sorry,
was
but
the
the adults
only.
in your life really sucked, and I'm
Yes.
sorry that you
It's all
you
under
went
the
through
rug.
that. Like, this is
Yeah,
not the the psychological term. This is me, this is me as a friend, your friend too saying, "I'm sorry that that happened." Like,
well, thank
that
you.
is not
Yeah,
what God meant for you in your life,
absolutely
what He
not.
created.
Absolutely not.
No.
And, the devil he was trying to use me for the next generational sin. And
Mhm.
I was not going to have it. So I finally told, and I got out of that house. And I'm back with my cousins that I told the story to and living with that family. And that was already, those were issues in itself too, because I felt like I was in prison because I was now a ward of the court. So I
Mhm.
wasn't like, there were certain rules. And my aunt really took those rules to heart and wouldn't let me do anything. So I'm the oldest of all the grandkids. And my cousin that
And
I
you were how
told
old
to,
at this time?
this time I moved in when I was 12.
Okay.
So I hadn't even gotten into, yeah, I was just past 12
Mhm.
and going into middle school. And my cousin that I told the abuse to, she's 3 months younger than me. And then I have another cousin who's a few years younger than us.
Mhm.
And so when my aunt played that card, you're the word of the court, Jen, you can't do this. I became angry because my other cousins got to have a longer um, uh,
Like curfew or
curfew. Yes, thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't. I had to be home, by 10, and my other cousin could be home at 12.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
there were just certain things that I just wasn't allowed to do because you're ward of the court. And I got frustrated with that because that was my identity, is like, I'm a ward of the court. I'm
Yeah.
Jennifer, not a ward of the court. And and I can see that she was troubled too, and that's a different
Mhm.
story. But and then I was Cinderella, my cousins got the same amount of pay that I did, but here's the problem. One of my cousins only had to take out the garbage, and my other cousin refused to do dishes. She only did things that she wanted to do. So
Oh,
I
okay.
had to take care of everybody's chores. If she refused
Oh,
dishes, guess
gee.
who got to do it? And I
You
got
were
paid the same amount.
responsible for it?
Yeah.
Gee.
So of course, I felt like Cinderella,
Mhm.
and nothing that I did was right. And I got the butt end of everything. And my cousin was, I'm assuming, you know, that she was angry with me for something. I don't know. I don't know why she would put me down. I got criticism. That's where I learned criticism and
Mm.
not accepting who I am. That's when I became self conscious of how I looked. I was too
You
skinny.
internalized it, you turned it
Yes,
inward on yourself, those voices
yeah,
became the voice in your own head? Is that am I
exactly.
yeah.
I was too skinny. I was the one who couldn't gain weight. I was the one who everyone liked. I was the one who didn't wear enough makeup. you don't know how to do the dishes right. So let me show you, instead of
Mhm.
showing me how to do the dishes right, my aunt would take them all out and then do them her way. And then I thought, well, why am I doing them at all? Like, so I didn't learn from my aunt either. She was just like my grandma, stay out of the way. And I don't want to teach you anything. If you're doing it wrong, I'll have to do it instead of teaching me how to do it.
Oh, right,
So
right.
that was a harsh message there. And so, of course, by the time I hit 18, I had told God I want out and I did not want to live there anymore. And I had a boyfriend waiting for me with his parents that helped
Mhm,
me move out. And
mhm.
so I left there
So
and
you
I
were
ended up,
there from what age? From 12 to 18? Is that
no, I was okay. So, yes, from 12 to 18, that was the first time I actually spent and stayed at the same schools
That's
from the
what I was
beginning to
thinking,
the
the
end.
longest
Yeah.
time that you
Yeah.
had.
That was the
Wow.
longest time where I stayed put. However, I still had the act of going to my room, even though I shared it with my cousin. It still was my domain. It's where I spent most of the time.
Was it,
And
like, your safe
it
place,
was
do you
my
think?
safe
Your room?
place,
Yeah.
and if I wanted to cry, I'll just put the covers over my head and cry,
Mhm,
and I did a
mhm.
lot of crying when I was there.
Mm.
I just felt not seen,
Mhm.
I wasn't there, and if I
And
was,
not
it was
heard, because
something
it sounds like
wrong.
they didn't hear you either, that through your life you were taught to stifle your voice,
Yes.
right? And like you said, be seen and not heard.
Yes. And then that's just a pattern that I stuck with because I knew I'll stay safe if I go to my room and cry and not say a word. Then I know I'm
Mm,
safe. Yeah, so that's what that
mm,
was like.
mm. Well, you're
Yeah,
breaking the silence now, Jen.
I sure am.
You are. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and it's taken a long time, and I'm hoping that through my vlogging that I can help people find a voice because,
Mhm.
this generational abuse has to stop because that's why we're where we're at today.
Yeah. So you were 18, so you moved in with a boyfriend and his family. Was
Yes.
that a good relationship or what?
No. Uh, so when I first dated the guy, I thought he was a dork. And I did. I thought he was a dork.
That was
Um,
another one of those words. Dweeb, dork, nerd, dork. I have not heard that word in a long time.
but he wouldn't leave me alone. And he just kept saying, I really like you. I really like you. And I mean, he was cute. So I said, okay, fine. I mean,
Persistent guy.
yeah. And then I didn't realize what kind of a mess I was in, but my best friend told me at the time, "You don't wanna be with him, Jennifer, he's a loser." And I got offended by that and told her to basically take off, "I don't wanna be around you," but I was very
Back
rude about
off.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told her I didn't wanna see her again. And then about a year later, I started discovering a few things after him and I lived on our own and after I had my baby. I finally went to her and I said, "You're right, like, he is a bad news guy." And so he would be the one that would take my money. I would earn money, and then he would take it and spend it on drugs and he would
Oh,
not go to work. He would only work for 2 to
sounds
3 days to get a paycheck, blow it on drugs, and so
interesting. Can I
yeah.
just, you know what that reminds me of?
What's that?
Who in your past and your upbringing does that remind you of?
Oh, absolutely,
Your
well,
dad,
every
right?
my dad, everybody, if you wanna
Yeah.
think about it, um, I guess, yeah, yeah, he was on drugs and he had an addiction. He didn't drink, but he was an addicted person. And I
Mhm.
mean, that is not easy to live with. I had to do some weird things to make ends meet. I had to hide money in places that you would never think about. And
Mhm.
that's how I did it. And God moved in a big way in my life. And that's one of the biggest miracles I have in my book that's coming out called Beyond Understanding, is that miracle that I said, God, I need you. And God showed up. But it
Yeah.
is such a miraculous story. The story takes place in a course of a week to 2 weeks. And like he was there every step of the way and got me out. And in the meantime, I had a daughter, and that was difficult because I'm stressed out and I'm thinking, I'm being my mother. This is where I remind myself as a mother. I'm stressed
Okay.
out. I have a
Right.
baby. I want to love her, but I'm having a hard time loving her right now because I'm in
Mhm.
this mess with this guy who is
Mhm.
telling me I'm a loser, I'm a whore, I'm ugly,
Mm.
and I'm fat and I'm useless
Mm.
and taking my money. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I said,
Mhm.
God, I have to get through this. I cannot pass on the physical abuse. And it was
Right.
very
Right.
difficult to not want to take it out on her, but I had to look at her and say, she's my baby girl, and this is the baby girl I wanted my whole life. I cannot hurt her. So God moved.
You wanted your baby
Oh,
girl.
it was
You
an
wanted you
urge.
didn't
Yes.
reject her, right?
It was
You
a
were breaking that
desperate.
cycle just by wanting your daughter,
I
wanting
loved
her.
my daughter, and she was the baby that I always wanted a daughter first. That's the main thing.
Okay.
Even growing up, I had my daughter's name picked out in high school, even before I had her,
Wow.
like 3 years prior. So I knew that she was coming. I had no clue why
Mhm.
I knew that. I just
You
believed
just
it.
did.
And
Yep.
I named her, and I thought maybe that was my prophetic word. God, I want a daughter, and her name's going to be that. And
Yep.
so that's what I did.
So
So
how did you
that was a
keep
story.
from abusing her? Like you called out to God and
I
you
just
sought his
said,
help.
I'm not going to do that to her. And I knew
Yeah.
I had to leave my
You
boyfriend.
made a choice and a
Yes.
determination.
I
Yeah.
looked at her one day and I thought, I if I don't get help, I'm going to end up abusing her, and I
Mm.
need to go to church. And that's when I found God. That's when he became apparent in my life.
Okay.
And that's through that church and me waking up to seeing him, not my life. I didn't wake up yet. I
Yeah.
recognized, oh, God, he's the one
The first
who's
step. Yeah.
that's who's God. That's what I needed. I know I'm asking God for help, but I didn't know how to do that because I didn't even know who Jesus was.
Mhm.
I didn't know. All I know is you don't say his
Right.
name in vain. So I
Yeah,
go to the
you saw
church.
the rules, the
Yes.
rule base, the religion part, right? But not that
Yeah, and
connection, that relationship, that person to develop a
right.
relationship with.
And in my
Yeah.
case, I just stay quiet, but all I know is, so when I went to the church, I just started bawling and bawling and bawling, and I
Oh,
prayed, and that's when other people were raising their hands, and I wrote, and I mean my body was just in chills when I was done. And so I went home and I just prayed. I said, God, I need out. I need help. And
yeah.
he saw he showed me out within a few months, not even maybe a month or two later. I'm having a hard time with my timeline, so I
That's
just have to
okay.
base it on the
Okay.
age of my daughter,
Yeah.
and she hasn't even been walking yet. So by the time she hit 3, I went to that church before that time, and then when she was 3 is when God showed himself. And
Mm.
I woke up and said, today's the day.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. And it's a wild story. I can't wait to share that
In your
uh,
book, right?
in my book. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm
So you had
excited
your
about
daughter
that.
out of that relationship.
Yes.
Now what? Was your and you accepted
Well,
Christ?
Then,
Was
well,
everything magically good or
no, nothing, it wasn't magically good, and I remember thinking, like, I keep putting God in the back burner, but I didn't really understand what that meant. Like, this is in hindsight, I realize this. And so I'm still going through struggles. Now I'm homeless because I just left my addictive man,
yeah.
and my daughter and I are living in a shelter and trying to find a place to live. And so I was homeless for about, I don't know, 3-4 months. And that was really difficult to get through as a single mother who was only 18 years old. Or no, I was 19, 20 at this point, and
Okay.
homeless with a child. And so I was going through stuff, and I went into a shelter after I left my boyfriend, and I ended up in same sex relationships.
Okay.
And I didn't know what was going on. All I knew is the feelings I had with her was really, I was drawn to her, but I don't know how, because
Mhm.
I just knew that she seemed like a nice person. And so
Mhm.
I'm going through this period of what I call in my book the fog. And
Okay.
I'm just kind of like, I'm not getting therapy. I'm being a mom who's working
Mhm.
full time and who's still in trauma, and I don't know,
Mhm.
I don't realize it. So I'm in the same sex relationships, and they're alcoholics, and
Okay.
these are
Which is
women that,
familiar to you, right?
yes,
That's a
very
familiar.
familiar to me. So there's, well,
Yeah.
here's the funny part. I go to my boyfriend addicted to drugs, and then right into relationships with women that are addicted to alcohol. And so it's like,
Yeah.
wow, I didn't
And your
even
dad was
see it.
addicted to both, right?
Yeah, and so was
There
my
you go.
mother.
There
Both,
you
yeah,
go.
I've got 2
Yep.
sets happening here. And I don't see this at this time, but I just recognize, well, gosh, by now I've been with 2 women who have had more than 2 children, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, I don't understand that. And it finally
In
occurred
what
to me
way?
one day, well, I wasn't sure, well, are they gay? Like, am I gay? Like, I didn't know that gay people had children. I didn't understand the scene. So I
Right, right.
acted gay. I put clothes on that made me look like I was gay, and I was trying to be in that scene. I was trying to find who I
Your
am,
place. Your
my
place to fit
place.
in.
Where do I
Yeah.
belong? And so I'm with these women, and I just see problems and problems, and I'm questioning myself, and I'm like, wait a minute. I don't think I'm gay because I'm not attracted to these women. I'm attracted to men, but why am I with them? And it dawns on me, I'm trying to find my mother in them, you know. And when I
Oh,
discovered that, it was like
wow. It's
my eyes just kind of woke up a little bit more, and I'm like, I'm not gay. There's no way I'm not gay. So I immediately got out of that
mhm.
situation. And so that took about 7 years to get out of that fog, to find my identity, who I was, and all that.
Mhm.
And I did get to find some of it. And through that process, I found that. And then when I realized, okay, well, I guess I'm going to be with men now, and still in my fog, I immediately go on to dating sites and look for a new man. Now, of course, it took me some
Mm.
time. I didn't just leave the girlfriend and say, look, we're not together anymore. I go online.
Right,
This
right,
took
right.
probably a year for me to
Right.
process
You're
everything that
condensing the
happened.
timeline a little bit.
Yes, because we do only have 1 hour show.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So
yes.
So then I ended up right into another problem. So I'm dating a man who's in prison, and I think, well, we all have a past. So
He's in prison at the time you're
he
dating him?
was prison. He just got
Oh, I
released.
see.
And
Right.
I met him through my a different aunt on my mom's side, and she told me, "Jennifer, you don't wanna go there." And I'm like, "Well, people change." She's like, "You don't wanna go there." But I wasn't listening. I was still trying to run my life the way I wanted it or the way I seemed fit. And
Right.
so now the situation, it has still occurred. I wonder if it's rape when you say yes to somebody. But I told him I wanted protection. I knew I didn't want a child. I couldn't afford another child, and he
Mhm.
refused it. And I'm trying to, get him away from me, and he's refusing it. So this is where I wonder, well, is that rape? And then,
Oh, yes. I'll tell
and
you,
then
yes. Yes, it
you
is.
know, and I've come to terms that I think it is. And,
Yeah.
it's such a hard, that's where it's one of
He
those case by
stomped all over
case.
your boundaries, right? He
Yes.
stomped on your
And I
boundaries.
didn't have my voice to say no. I said, I want protection. And he was persistent and just kept me, he just kept held me down. So that's rape.
Well,
And
that
then
yeah, he held you down, like, yeah.
I had to come to
I'm
terms
just
with that.
saying
Like,
I'm just saying for any women out there, right? Like, would you not
yes,
tell them, like, "Hey, yeah." When
you
it's
know,
yourself and you feel like maybe you have a part in it, that's different, but if,
yes,
say, your daughter or another woman out there had that situation, would you
exactly.
tell her, "Yeah, that's rape?" Like,
Yes,
would there be
absolutely.
that struggle, that back and forth? Probably not as much, right?
Right, that's right. Like,
Yeah.
I did have to struggle with that because I felt like I deserved it. I felt like, well, that's what you get, and it's like, it wasn't like that, It
Mm,
started out with, I liked the guy, and to me, it was love,
mhm,
and it did not end that way, and that is
mhm.
rape. And
It
so,
is. It is.
I ended up pregnant, and I'm like, you know, um, "I'm pregnant now." And the first thing he says is, "Well, I've got 6 kids, I'm not having another one."
Oh,
Like,
and
"What?"
you said and you told him you didn't want any kids, like, wow.
He didn't wanna wear protection, but he knew already he didn't want kids? Like, what
Mhm.
does that tell you about that individual?
Yeah.
So, clearly, I was not seeing that because I was still sleeping,
Yeah.
and so
You
I'm
saw
like,
what you wanted to see or hoped to see probably, right?
"Yeah."
Would you
And
say? Yeah.
so I hang up the phone, and I'm just thinking, like, "What am I gonna do? How am I gonna have a baby
Mhm.
again with a guy who doesn't want it? I can't do this alone. Who's gonna help me?" And so I get a phone call from him a couple of days later, and we talk, and he says, "Well, I have an appointment set up for you." And I'm like, "An appointment? What appointment?" He goes, "Well, we need to take care of this, right? I can't afford it. I'm certainly not gonna be able to take care of the baby, so we're gonna have to abort it." And I'm like,
Mm.
I did not expect that out of his mouth. I never once thought about abortion.
Mhm.
And then he planted the seed in my mind, and I'm thinking about my life, and I'm not thinking about Jesus at all. Like he's on that back burner again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have no one to go to. My aunt's not gonna help me, who introduced us.
Mhm.
I have no
'Cause she
money.
warned you from the beginning
She
too, right?
warned me, and I was
Is that
certainly
why
not
you
gonna
thought
tell her I told you so, like,
right? Yeah.
and I wasn't about to tell my best friend the mess I got into, so I kept that a secret,
Oh, and
and
you have been taught to keep things a secret, keep things hidden, right?
yes. So I made the appointment, and I went in there and did the procedure, and I had an abortion, and that was really heavy for me because I was, like, pushed. He knew exactly what he was doing. Set up an appointment, he paid for it. All I had to do was show up. Gave me a ride. It was like the most disgusting thing I had ever experienced other than having the abortion itself. And
Mhm.
so for a long time, I didn't tell anybody. I never told a soul about it. And
Mm.
I had to come to terms with that. And it was through Jesus who helped me. And I went through the process of, I don't want to say legally um, grieved him, but I found the time in my life where I went back and tried to find, you know, paperwork about my brother, and I just couldn't find it. And so I took that moment to grieve my baby brother because I've always felt like
So
I
you
had.
never mentioned about that, about your baby brother?
Oh, okay. So my
Oh,
mom, when I was 3 years old, I did forget that. She
yeah.
had a baby boy that was stillborn. So
Mhm.
I'm sure that had to have given her more wrath in my on why she may have abused me. I don't know. I can only imagine her heart was devastated when she lost a baby. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
when I was going through the process of grieving, I think was my son, because I've always felt like my second child will be a son. I believed that that
Okay.
pregnancy was a boy. And so
Right.
my way of grieving was remembering my brother. And I went and looked for hospitals and tried to find records, but nothing came out of it. I got nothing. And then I grieved my baby boy. And so I have a chapter in my book about the two babies that
Oh.
are in heaven. And, I feel at peace at what happened that day. And I may have had a part of it, but it was not, I just didn't understand. And Jesus since then has blessed me with another son. And I believe that I have found peace in that whole situation. So
Mm.
again, I get to be that voice for somebody who had an
Yeah.
abortion and who can't tell their story because they can't. And so, yeah, that was
Probably a
that.
lot of feelings coming up for them too,
Oh,
right?
for
Like,
sure. I had a lot of guilt, the guilt of putting myself into that situation. And then I had to remember, well, why did I put myself into that position? Well, because I didn't know what I was doing in my life. There was so much trauma, I couldn't think straight. I didn't know who to reach to. And I had no family. I only had a best friend, and I didn't even
yeah.
want her to judge me. Not that I know now she wouldn't have, but I
But
never
at
told
that
her.
time, right? Like
Yeah,
you had to make choices, difficult choices, right? Well, not a lot of like good circumstances to make
right.
good choices. You made the choices you had in the moment with what you knew and with what, you know?
That's right. Like you are given what you're given, and I had to work with what I had. And
Yeah.
so that was that. That is a big thing to go through, something like that. And I told God, like after, I said, I will never do that again, ever.
Mhm.
And so now here's the messed up part. I'm still dating the guy, even after the fact.
Okay.
And I go online because I want another relationship. And while I'm dating him, I'm making arrangements to come up to Canada with another guy.
Mhm.
Like, and so my daughter and I take a 2-week trip to Canada and we view the situation, and I think everything's fine. I don't see a problem. And I make the move and I
You
end
moved
up
to
right back
Canada.
into yeah, I made the move to Canada. And I feel so foolish, but I'm just going to be out there and just say I never even looked up Canada. Now, I know my grandparents had gone there from time to time, but they never told me it was cold or nothing. I
Big
didn't
shock.
think that
Oh.
north means cold. So I got a rude awakening, but only with, the weather was the only rude awakening and the relationship that I ended up leaving Oregon for. But when I look back now in hindsight, everything that happened since I moved to Canada is all God orchestrated.
Okay.
And, some people say, well, you probably moved to run away. And maybe that is possible, that is a piece of it. But I think it was God's divine intervention on who I ended up with and how I got up here and where I would end up. Because I just randomly just met a guy and liked him, and he happened to be in Canada. I didn't say, okay, I'm going to meet a guy that lives in Canada. It just
Right.
happened to be that's who I met. And I thought, well, I love moving. I'm used to it. I can adapt to anything. So we
What
truck
was
it
it you
up.
told me about moving that you're what was it? You said you're a professional mover? You
I'm a
told me this.
professional packer. Yes.
Professional packer.
I could totally get hired to. I'm really good at packing boxes. And yeah, I've always made that joke. I'm so organized too. I mean, if you're going to be a mover, you got to be organized. And I have a gift of organizing. And so I'm really good at packing up. But I don't live very largely. I've never been like that. I only
Mhm,
live with what I need. I don't live with more than I need. And
mhm.
I guess I've gotten into that habit of there's just no sense in keeping everything when you're just going to move anyway. So
Okay,
that's the,
interesting. So
yeah.
you
So
moved to Canada
yeah.
and you said there was problems in that relationship?
Yes. Like I didn't see everything until after, well, my wedding. Like I saw everything, but I felt like I was trapped. I mean, I have a wedding that I describe in my book that will probably top anybody's worst nightmare. I
Mm.
mean, I even wore a black dress because the guy just didn't care. Uh,
Oh my
he
goodness.
he used a past ring that was from a past relationship, found it in the yard one day because he threw it, I guess, because he got mad, and then stuck it on his finger one day. I just, out of the blue, after we were married, I saw him with a ring one day and he told me about it. I'm like, okay. And so I ended up in a relationship with a drinker and
Alcohol again,
an
yeah.
alcoholic. And I mean, this was an alcoholism that I've never seen before. And so I walked into a big, big mess. And this would be, again, the second big divine thing that happened. And so he was economically abusive to me. So when he had me come up to Canada, he put me under a sponsorship. And that sponsorship is an agreement between Canada and the States saying that my husband is responsible for me.
Yeah.
So if I need anything, he's to pay for it. And he
Mhm.
agreed. Like, and so
That was the agreement, yeah.
that was the agreement. Now we lived in a small town, so there was not job opportunities. And on top of that, I lived on an acreage. So there were no jobs and I didn't have a car and he's the only one who owned a car. So he was very clear about not worrying about working. I will take care of you. So I had every
Mhm,
thought in the world that he would.
mhm.
And well, that's when the economical abuse started. He would erase contacts that I had with my family because he was the one who took care of the computer. So I would write letters to my family and send them off, and then I would go to bed. He would get up really in the morning because he's a farmer,
Oh,
and he would drink and he would erase it. And I caught him doing it one day. And
like
that's when I
emails
realized
or
emails. He was erasing all my emails, all my letters, all the correspondences. So for the first 6 months, I thought my family just didn't care. They were glad I moved.
Oh,
And
oh.
I didn't have my voice to say, hey, why aren't you calling me?
Mhm.
Why aren't I just imploded? I just went back to being in,
Yeah.
I don't know the word I'm looking for, but and so I didn't even realize I was in a big mess yet. And then he would not pay for my sponsorship. So every couple of months, you have to pay a fee to get the paperwork progressing so I can be considered a landed status in Canada, right?
Right,
So
right.
for 2 years, this man wouldn't pay for it. And so they would make me start over. So I had to reapply. And he did this for 2 years. And because he did this, my daughter wasn't allowed to go to school. So I had to homeschool her. Now
What? She
you
wasn't allowed to go to
imagine,
school.
me having to homeschool my daughter who missed gaps of school. So
Right, right.
he economically abused me by saying, if you do this, I'll just send you back home. I'll deport you.
He
So
held
that's
that
what
over your
happened.
head.
Oh, he did. And he used monetary to do it. So he got to a point where he was not giving us money to even to give food. And he was doing things like threatening my daughter's life a couple times. One would be, hey, let's go shooting outside. And I had to tell my husband, no, you just drank and it's at nighttime. You're not going to go shooting with my daughter.
Mhm.
Or he would use the lawnmower and scare my daughter into thinking he was going to run her over. And
Mm.
then the boiling point got to when I received a phone call from a lady at a bar, who she was the bartender, and she said that your husband is sitting here with two of his friends and they're talking about how they're going to shoot you. And so that's when I said, God, I need you and I need to get out and I need to get out
Yeah.
now.
Yep.
And he made the way. And I've got the chills.
Wow.
I can't wait to tell that story.
He made a way where there was no way, like,
Yes,
really. Just
he
like the
made
song,
a
he made a
way.
way where there was no way.
He
You
put
couldn't do it
words.
on your own.
Oh, no, I couldn't have. I just wouldn't have known what to do. I was in the middle of nowhere with no automobile, and he found me through it. And it is the most divine story you'll ever read. I mean, I could say that other people have them too, but for my life, that was the
Yeah.
second big appearance. And so, but I should back up a little bit. After that miraculous move from my daughter's dad, that's when I went and got baptized. I knew that
Yeah.
God was with me, for me,
Yeah.
but I just kept him on that back burner though without realizing it. But I knew he was for me, and after that, I knew that God was the miracle worker, the way maker in my life. And he has been proving it to me ever since. Yeah, that
Oh.
was a big, big thing, and I went through a lot of turmoil with that. There's stories behind what happened, so at the point, I ended up homeless again, and this time from my husband that I was homeless with, and he was threatening to deport me, and I'm like, "I need to write a letter to the MLM." So, and I think
MLA? Yeah.
MLA, yeah. I do that
To
again.
the
I
multi-level marketing company.
I
Sorry.
do it all the time. I've got lots of experience in that. And I think it was
MLA, member of legislature.
yes, and I think it was
Represent
Klein.
elected representative for the government.
Right.
For those that
Yeah,
don't know that are in the US or other countries.
right.
Yeah.
So I wrote a letter to him and I said, "Look," I said, "I don't have a problem with leaving the country because one of the things that I was scared about is I had thought about should I go home? This is where my opportunity is where I could go home." But then my husband says to me, if you take my son across the border, I'll call the police on you.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I'm like, oh man, my paperwork I'm not even a landed status yet. And I said in my MLA letter, I said, I am in an abusive relationship and I'm contemplating on coming home, but I don't want to because I started liking it here. And I said, either you let me stay here with my children or I leave and you give me permission to take my son home. And I got an answer within a week and they gave me landed status and I was able
Oh,
to,
yay.
yeah.
Amen. And
And
you used your voice,
I
Jennifer. You
did. It was
used
a
your
long
voice.
letter. And
You
that,
freed your
oh,
voice.
I had my voice that day. And that's when things really changed for me. And I mean, that's not even, I still hadn't woken up yet. Like my
So
waking up, yeah.
cut to the waking up and how God is moving in your life now.
Well, so I went through a process of living in a town, and it was the longest town that I had stayed in without moving. And so I did move in that town, though, a couple places, but it was still stayed the same town, and it let my kids, at least my son, have that steady home feel. And I
Mhm.
didn't do a lot of moving because I just didn't want to anymore. I'd already done that with my daughter, and I did it. I didn't want to put my son through that because he was,
Breaking another cycle, right?
yeah, and he was born with ADHD. And, you know, on a side note, I really believe that that has a lot to do with alcoholism. And I don't know, that to me, there's a link there. And, but another story, another day. So I didn't want to do that to my son, who was already struggling with mental issues. So it was important for me to stay put. And then I went through a series of different things with my husband. And then um, I ended up hating the court systems because I got a rude awakening through the whole court system. But when I look back on that, I realized that God wanted me to stay put in. He wanted me to stay in Alberta, not go back home. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I have tried and tried to go back home, and everything kept going wrong. The first one was my problem with my landed status. The second time was the Oregon fires. And then there was another issue in the States where I couldn't go. And then COVID hit. And by then I'm like, I'm meant to stay home. I'm just meant to stay home.
This is your home now.
This
Yeah.
is my home now. So, and I think I see a lot of reasons why I was meant to stay here. So I accepted that. And then there was a point in my life where I was like, okay, I need I need to get a job, and I'm not happy where I'm at anymore because I wasn't really getting anything. It was just I was living in a I guess you could say a retirement community, and although it was a wonderful place to live, there's nothing there to help you grow as a person. So I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm missing something. I need something, but I don't know what it is. And this is again something I'm putting God in the back burner. I'm not going
Yeah.
directly to him. I'm going to
Yeah.
my understanding. So I call up my daughter and I said, "Look, I don't want to be in this town anymore. Where do you think I should go?" And she's like, "Oh, I think you should go to Red Deer, Mom." Well, Red Deer was a town that we kind of grew accustomed to driving to because it was an outing and we loved it, and it wasn't as
Mhm.
busy as Calgary and Edmonton because I don't like Edmonton.
A
I always got
mid-sized
lost.
city with a small town feel. That's how I
Yeah.
call it anyways.
And
Yeah.
right. So we learned. And so when she planted that in my head, I'm like, I couldn't let it go. It just kept festering and festering. And then I'm looking into it, like,
Fester.
what do they have here? What's in it for me? And so I just got this urge to go. And so I made the move again, and I ended up in a basement suite. And we were having a recession at that time in 2017, and there were just no jobs. And I was struggling. And I ended up, after a year of living in this basement suite, and I was paying quite a bit of money for it, I was getting desperate for a job. And so I find a job, and something happened there that made me question, who I am and what kind of an establishment that I want to work for. And
Mhm.
so I decided I can't work for these people anymore. And I went into really severe depression at that point because by now I'm in Red Deer a year. I can't find a job. I'm not getting what I need. And the people that I'm living with, like, they're controlling me. They're controlling my heating. They look into my windows. And I mean, it's just not the
Mm.
ideal place. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking,
Mhm.
I made another mistake. So I lay down in bed and I'm praying to God to just take me out of this earth. I don't want to be here. Nobody wants me. Nobody loves me.
Yeah.
I can't find my place. I don't belong anywhere. What's the point in living? There's no need for me to live. And
Mhm.
so I'm crying and I'm just laying there. And my son comes out of his room, and then he pops his head into my room and says, "Hi, Mom," with his big grin. And I'm like, I can't leave my son. He already doesn't
Yeah.
have a dad. What's that going to show to my son if I kill myself? And that's
Yeah.
when I just kind of put my thought together, and I went into the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I said everything that I don't like about myself. I don't like that I'm needy. I don't like that people abuse me. I don't like that I don't know who I am, where I'm supposed to go. What am I doing? And
Mhm.
then I just kind of went back on medication, and then I just sat there in disbelief, and the first thing that popped in my head is go on medical leave because you can't even think straight. So that's
Right?
what I did. And I went into the and then the next thing I hear in my, it's like, it's an urge. It's almost like, go here. And it's
Yeah.
cool because I can literally
In your
hear it
spirit.
audio.
You hear it in your
My
spirit. Yeah,
spirit
in
is
your yeah.
making me feel it. And then I hear it and I can see it popping in my head. Oh, okay. I need to go see a therapist. And that therapist later on ends up taking me to a different church that I go into recovery. And in the meantime, I'm going through meditation. I'm seeing a therapist. I'm going to a whole bunch of groups, and I am just getting all of my emotions out. I mean, all I can do is cry.
You're
I can't even
using your
talk.
voice. You're using your
Yeah,
voice.
I was trying to. Like, the therapist was able to let me use my voice, and the group therapy allowed me to understand that I wasn't alone and that this is something that happens to other people. And I just cried and cried and cried and let those emotions out. And I finally graduated from all of that. It took me a full year of working every day of the week at making myself a better person.
Mhm.
And then when I was finished, COVID happened, and um, that's when I saw the world just behave in a way that, like, was baffling to me. Like, I don't know, if the world went into chaos like that, the last thing I would think about is toilet paper. I mean, I just didn't
Right?
understand people's thinking, and I really didn't have a fear of it. It's and now I realize why I didn't. And so
Which
I went
is
to this new church and discovered something. And through that experience, that I had to embarrass myself so that I can see what Jesus saw in me. And that's when I was ready to move into the next phase of my life. But during that church is where I was introduced to Celebrate Recovery. And there I took a 7-year uh, recovery program. But I was only there for about 5 years, and that's when it was, for me, it like felt like I was going backwards. Like there was a point after the 5 years where I'm like, this is getting routine. It's starting to make me feel like I'm going backwards, and I need something new. So I prayed. I said, God, I need something new, but I don't know what that looks like. And then during COVID, I saw a few things, and then I picked a few churches that I had planned on walking to, because at this point I had to give up my car. Like, it wasn't working. So I had to
mhm.
put it away. And that was a blessing in disguise I didn't know about until later. But he wanted me to stay at this new church that I'm at. And I think he used my car to do it, because he put it out of its misery, and then I ended up selling it. So that was clear to me. And then I heard the Holy Spirit say, you need to go to the church down the hill, the little church. And that church happened to be a little bit more out of the way than the other two that I had planned on going to. And that's where I was introduced to Freedom Session. And
Yeah.
through that is when I woke up, completely woke up. I was able to focus on the core issue, which was my mother, was the core issue for me.
Mhm.
And I saw her life in a different perspective. And it allowed me to see my life in a different perspective. And that's
Right.
when everything changed. Everything got better after that point.
So how? Like, how did it change your life?
Well, okay, this is the fun thing. I used to make fun of people who were godly, as a young kid, because I didn't get it, right? And I remember saying, well, I don't want to follow the Lord. He's probably going to make me do things that I don't want to do. Well, little do I know how opposite that really is. And I realize that he really does meet us where we're at in our life. And
Mhm.
so when I came into Freedom Session and discovered who my mom was, I was able to finally look back at everybody else in my life and what their issues were. I
Yeah.
discovered that we all have the same common denominator. We all have junk in our lives. And
Mhm.
what makes me stand out is I was willing to look at the junk and
That's
change it.
right.
And so, yeah, that made me, it took me out of the world. And now I'm by myself out here and I'm looking into this big bubble of what the world looks like. And I see everything. And I realize that the people that have hurt me in my life were people who were hurting,
Mhm.
who didn't know how to focus, who didn't know how to function, who didn't understand what they were going through because they were in
Yeah.
their muck. And so
They weren't
that
awake, right?
they
They
weren't
weren't awake.
awake. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that gave me an understanding of what being awake is and what God's purpose in our life is. Like we don't know what is going on in our lives. God does. And so he was able to show me that through those lessons. And then when I finally understood it, I was able to authentically forgive people because I realized the abuses I've been through, it's not about me. It's
Yeah.
about them. I was
Yeah.
just in their way.
Yeah.
And so when I started seeing that and forgiving people in my life, this is what happened. Okay. The first thing that happened was um, I said, God, I understand that my husband wanted to control me by refusing to divorce me when I left. That's beyond my control. But
Mhm.
I want to let you know that that doesn't hover over me anymore. I've forgiven my husband. I understand his life. And I just want to be free from that and to please release me from that chain.
Mm.
Okay. 2 years later, my husband dies. And guess who has to bury him? Now, can you
You.
imagine? I was still the next of kin because he refused to divorce me.
Mm.
So I had, in order for me to bury him with peace and not disrespect his family, I had to release him. I had to forgive him wholeheartedly. And so that was the other barrier. Like I had my mom and my husband were two big pieces because I got married to a man who was not godly. I felt so guilty
Mhm.
about that. And so that was God's way of releasing me from that error. And that's when I became me again, was when he died. He had no more power over me. And
Mhm.
I was able to appreciate my husband's life and what he put in my life as far as lessons and what he missed, what he could have had. So when I'm at the funeral and I'm sobbing while his family are looking at me like, what are you crying about? You left him. Like I could see the judgments at the funeral,
Yeah.
but what they don't see is that I'm sobbing for a man who never found Jesus in his life, who held on to so much anger and bitterness
Yeah.
and self-loathing that he didn't know how to release the tension. And
Mm.
so that's what I'm grieving over is another child that Jesus might not end up with. I
Yeah.
don't know if he went to God.
And who he could have been, who he was created to be, that little boy. It sounds
Yes,
like you could start to see with the expanded view that God has,
absolutely.
right? And is
Yeah,
that what you mean by the beyond understanding?
yes. Because, the family is thinking that, oh, she's crying because why? Well, they're thinking earthly reasons. They're not realizing that I have discovered something and
Mhm.
that he deserves to have compassion even if he wanted
Mhm.
to kill me. And
Mhm.
there are people out there that just don't understand that.
That is
And
a hard thing to understand, even hearing,
tell
like,
me
just
about it. And it took me a year to process that. I mean, I didn't even get that at the time because I was going home going, what was I crying about? This is a man who I was never in love with.
yeah,
We did not have love. Like, why am I crying? Like, I didn't
yeah.
even understand it myself. So that
So
was
it
pretty.
sounds like God taught you so much, like, this journey that you had through your life. I can see how you laid it out so clearly, um, the things that you went through, the
Mhm.
how you felt and life when you were a child, and looking back at the journey. And I can see, like you said, the beyond understanding. Like, do you want to talk about that? I kind of let the cat out of the bag. I'm sorry, but the
Well, no,
beyond
that's okay.
understanding, what
Yeah, like the message I'm trying to tell people is
so tell
beyond
me about
our understanding.
that. That
Yeah,
you told me,
is that
is that what your book is?
yes, my book is going to be called Beyond Understanding, and I'm in the editing phase right now, and it's moving along. Um, so basically, what it is it's about how we live in the world and that we don't understand what our divine reason of being here is. You know, a lot of the world thinks that we're just put on
Mhm.
this earth to live and do our thing and die, but that's not what we're here for. And in order to understand that, you have to
Yeah.
be able to look at people in a different perspective. So I had to step out of
Mm.
my selfish way and look at other people's perspective and see their life. And then everything makes
Wow.
sense. And that's when I thought, well, I need to write my book. People need to understand this because I mean, it was only until I
That
hit
is a
50.
major revelation,
It
right?
is a major
Like
revelation, and I
it, people
feel
can't comprehend.
yes. And that's why I felt the need to tell my story because there is a level of understanding of what we're going through. You know, Jesus isn't punishing us, and that's why we're homeless. You know, sin is getting
Yeah.
in the way, and we're making choices that God did not expect us to take those choices. And so that is what happens when we take our choice. Sin wants to get into it. But when we take our
Mhm.
choices to God, good comes of it. And that's what I'm experiencing
Mhm.
now. Now I haven't been on medication for almost 2 years. I haven't gone through depression. Yes, I have low days, but I'm able to get out of it. I'm able to have a conversation with Jesus. I understand who I am through him because I understand who he is and what his lesson is for me. And when I'm looking in all my journals, of all the years that I've journaled all my stuff, I remember thinking one day, like, wow, this is really sad. Like, these are sad stories. I
It's
should
cutting
probably
out.
change my journal. But instead, what I did was I'm looking at them and I'm like, wow, this could be a book. Bing. I'm like, am I supposed to write this as my book?
Mhm.
And then that's
Mhm.
when I went into okay, so after Freedom Session got out, there was the Lioness Within class. And so I went
Yeah,
into
a
that
lioness
class.
arising. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what it was. A Lioness Arising. And in there, she talked about Lisa, the writer. She talked
Lisa
about
Bevere. Yeah.
Bevere, thank you. I'm not good with remembering certain names. Her voice was get your voice out. Be brave about bringing your voice out and sharing people what you can give. So that
Yeah.
was my message that Jesus was trying I got the impression that he was trying to tell me write this book.
Yeah.
So I finally get the words out on my book. And then I'm contemplating, I'm like, is this really something I'm supposed to do? I'm feeling kind of presumptuous, at this point. And that's when, okay, so the next year, it took me a year to get everything out on paper, to just get it off. And then that's the longest part, was the editing. Is I realized that I had too much of anger in there and frustration, and I had to take all of that out and just tell the story. And so
Mhm.
that's where it's at right now, is the story. And so that took a year, and then I was introduced into another class that was called what's that book? Accepting Ourself. Oh, I forgot the name of it, and I didn't want to
That's
forget.
okay.
Oh, Approved. That's what it was. Thank you.
Approved.
Approved. So that message in that class told me that you are important. You are a valuable person who has something to say, and what you have to say is important. So don't worry about what
Mhm.
people think, and
Right.
be more attentive on who you are. And so that made me realize, ah, I may feel nervous about saying what I need to say, but she's pointing out that God wants us to talk about things, and
Yeah.
that I am approved through him. And so that
Amen.
made me get back on the book and really start to edit. And it's almost in completion, but he's the ultimate publisher. So when that comes out, I don't know, but I expect it's in his timing for people to read that book. And
I just
so
want to tell you something, Jennifer.
for sure.
I'm looking up above my desk. I have a thing on the wall that says, "Each day I write the story of my life." And
Oh,
as you were
neat.
talking, I'm thinking God is writing the story of our lives each
I got
day,
the chills. Yes.
right? And we are stepping into that story. And before, when you were saying, "Well, what do I write about?" You didn't, the poetry wasn't what you had to live your life and live out the story to be able to write it. Right? To be able to write it,
Yeah,
and it
I
sounds
mean,
like it was a real healing journey, even going through
oh,
this editing and bringing these together. God is continuing to work and to heal and to grow, and you were saying about how you could see people with a new light. Were you
yeah,
able to see yourself from a new light and give some grace to yourself that God had given
absolutely.
you to see other people with?
Yes. I mean, that was the hardest part, was forgiving me. Um,
Yeah,
I had to forgive myself before or I had to forgive others. I can't remember what it was now. I wrote it in my book. I think I had to forgive me before I could forgive others. Or no, I think I had to forgive other people to learn how to forgive me, because I had to see them in God's eyes. Then I saw me through God's eyes, and it all made sense. So I was the last person
yeah,
to be forgiven for myself, and we are our worst critics. God truly is the
yeah.
author of my book. I'm just putting it on paper. And the
Amen.
healing is massive. Like, I've cried, I've laughed, I've thanked God. There's certain points that I'm like, there's just no way it wasn't God.
Right?
There is no
And you can see
accidents.
that clearly looking back. You can
Yes,
see his hand in all the events that came up. Um, if you were
exactly.
to, Jennifer, if you were to give one Bible verse that was your touch point through your life, what would that verse be?
I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, in Philippians 4:13. And I'm telling
Amen.
you, I've got the chills, because it is true. No matter what situation we're in, when you call him, he finds a way. And
Yep.
that's
He
part of the
finds a way where there's
understanding.
no way, like we said
Yes.
before.
And that is another layer of beyond understanding. Like, to me, people can talk science all they want and explain God away all they want, but even God had to use science for the Big Bang. That's
Yep.
my theory.
Yep.
And so we have to recognize who our leader is, because he's the only one who knows what is best for us.
Hmm.
We don't know. I
Hmm.
tried to make my life be the way it wanted to be, and I just kept coming up to a
Live on your
roadblock.
terms, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
all on my terms. And when I finally saw who I was in Jesus and who my identity was, it was easy to follow him.
So
Now
what is your identity
I
in
am
Christ?
I am an independent woman who is a truth teller, and I am a survivor that can conquer anything as long as if Jesus is with me. You know, I am a fun-loving, compassionate person who values people and their lives, and that is who I am. I mean, I could give you a whole list of things
Yeah.
of what I am
I
now.
hear I
Before
hear
I questioned it.
I hear, Jen, you are beloved daughter. You are an overcomer. You are an
Yes.
overcomer. You are not this unwanted child. You're not this person with learning disabilities. You're not um a person who needs to stay in abuse. You're not, you freed your voice. You're sharing to
Yes.
help bring others out of that captivity with the
Yes.
heart of God, with the mind of
Mhm.
Christ, with the understanding beyond understanding that God has gifted you with through your struggles, through your trials, your tribulations, your journey. And I got chills. I could listen to you forever, but we need
Thank
to wrap
you.
it up.
For
I
sure.
will need to probably do some editing, just like you do with
Absolutely.
your book. Now tell me, how can people find more out about you and listen to more of your stories and your wisdom that God has blessed you with? How can what is your link?
Well, I am on YouTube called Food for Life with the number 4,
Okay.
and I basically share my stories, and I don't reveal a whole lot in my book yet because I want it to be,
Mm.
for those readers.
Yeah,
But I do
right.
touch up on some stories, and it's just a level of how can we deal with today and how we can have Jesus in our life and how he can transform it.
Okay.
So those are the people I'm speaking to who need that little bit of hope
Oh, so
and
good.
know that they're not alone. Yeah.
So
So
good.
yeah, and
I
that
will
would be
put the link I will post the link in the show notes as well.
thank you.
But
I
I just wanna
appreciate
thank you so much for being here with me today and just sharing your journey like it's a brave journey. Thank you for being so authentic and vulnerable and trusting me, trusting us, trusting God with your
yes.
story. So,
Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
so much.
I appreciate being your guest, and may we be blessed in all that we do as long as if Jesus is by our side. Hey.
Amen. Amen. So I'm going to end the recording and I'll chat with you in a few minutes in the broadcast room.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you for watching Rise with Grace Stories of Women Moving from Pain to Promise. You too can move from the pain in your life to the promise of a new life. Go to www.lifeandbloomforyou.com. Sign up for the mailing list to find out when new episodes are coming out and to receive your free Love Like Jesus bundle just for signing up. Keep blooming in Him. Bye for now.